Hi, I'm Chris from Airwindows, and hey, you can do this. So that's all very well, except for it's really this. Because this is Airwindows kBeyond. So what kBeyond is, here let me set this up to sort of cycle through, is the next stage of reverb out of Airwindows. You got a little taste of this, a week ago, a couple weeks ago, with Verb 6's, but that's a testbed plugin. That is not what this is, because what this is usable form. And you see it right here. Regen, derez, filter, early RF, pre-delay, and dry wet. Not dissimilar to the kCosmos controls. And indeed, a lot of the new reverbs that are going to be coming out are going to use those kinds of controls. So what you do with that is, firstly, I can make this go back and forth between dry wet and full wet. Pre-delay does what you would expect. You get to put as much of a space between the initial sound and the delayed sound that you want. It's quite a large amount of pre-delay on there. I was demonstrating it with no pre-delay because the trick with this is the way that it's able to blend. So here's some of how that works. Regen scales all the way up to rather sustainy, which is going to be normal for these type of plugins, but you don't necessarily always want it to be on the very sustainy end. It's all very well and good, but I mean, you can use Cosmos for that. It's meant to be an appropriate amount of sort of bloom and extension. So you don't necessarily have it all the way in full sustain, even if it still sounds good doing it. Early RF is a separate thing. If we shut down Regen, we're hearing both. So with no early RF, you're hearing only the deep reverb, which is a 6x6 householder matrix. That's the thing that I've been developing recently, and there will be more like this. But if you shut off that and throw up early RF, I'm going to let it cycle through again so that it starts playing more actively. You will hear early RF is what I'm doing with other householder matrices like 3x3s or 4x4s suited to that purpose. The idea is that it's like a back wall off of which bright reflections happen, and they get fed into the full reverb. There's a bunch of cool things I can do with this. In this case, in kBeyond, which is essentially a recital hall, it's meant to make things like a piano sound really realistic. What you get is pretty reasonable, not too complicated reflections. Again, without it. And then here's the early reflections. And you combine it with wet, or combine it with dry rather. There's that slight aura around things, and that's going to be magnified if you choose to use pre-delay for stuff, because pre-delay will also delay early reflections. You're effectively stepping forward. Like this, or stepping forward even more. And then stepping back to the back of the room where the dry signal more or less merges with early reflections. Pre-delay is what controls that. Pre-delay is what makes it have more or less of that bright ambience around things. And bright ambience is a separate plugin, does completely different things. This is natural. This is one that's more realism oriented. And then lastly, filter. Filter applies to the deep reverb field. Listen to this. What is happening is not counting early reflections, which we're currently not using. The filter is my little take on a sync interpolation brick wall filter, which I can also give you that. We're working on it. But what happens with filter is it goes from relatively bright to considerably darker. And it's essentially your basic brick wall filter. It's a sync-based FIR filter, and it doesn't use lots of delay taps. They're happening inside the regeneration. I mean, not the regeneration, the derez. I've been working really hard. Forgive me for being a little bit scattered. And what that means is this can be bright or dark. It's filtering before hitting the reverb so that the reverb tail can bloom out a little bit. But then we can also do this. After all, this still has derez in it. Unlike kCosmos, this is using the higher quality of derez. It's using the type of derez where it goes in steps, and each of the stages is the highest quality I can get based on, here, let me fire in, early reflections also lives inside derez. What this is doing is it's letting you take the exact reverb that you're using and basically step it down in pitch, which increases the size. So this is essentially a deeply low-passed, rolled-off version of kBeyond, which was never designed to be a super long, lengthy reverb. It's a recital hall ambience. But we can zip it back up again too. For using it in the context of that type of thing, if that's what you want to do, you should probably use kCosmos for that, because it will swoop in a linear fashion rather than in steps. But this one is taking your recital hall and stepping both the early reflections and the extended reverb, which I've cranked all the way up to max, and essentially pitching it down so that it's like a big hall while remaining realistic. And that's because derez is using the Bezier curve downsampling, or the undersampling that I do. What that effectively means is if you're going for a bright, clear type of sound, there's another option which is fairly closely related. Where it will be depends upon what sample rate you're running, because these things operate on the basis of sample rate, meaning you're going to have different divisions running at 96K, for instance. It'll give you the same basic tone if you're at 96 or even like 192 or whatever, but there will be different steps for doing this. This is being run at 96 because I consider that to be a good modern day music generation thing. But what we've effectively done is enhanced all of that stuff. It's got the biggest possible reverb that I can make. But it's now also doing, I think even filter is going to behave similarly in that it will be somewhat subject to derezzing. Everything will drop down, but it'll still play a role even if you're dropping it way down like that. So with that, we've used derez. We're dialing in filter a little bit. In fact, let's make filter go a little bit brighter. Maybe slightly less of the early reflections, given that it's meant to be a giant space. We're not actually doing any pre-delay, but we could maybe use a tiny little bit of it, at which point I could return to the very beginning again and allow the raw sounds to come through so that it is using the same kind of reverb effect as I did for the very beginning of the demo, but this is one step of derez down. So it's using kBeyond as a sort of one step larger in size, but still essentially the same recital hall type sound, and it should sound like this. So that's pretty, but of course what we started with was full derez, not nearly as much regen, same amount of filter was about the same, more in the way of early reflections, no pre-delay, and this is the sort of higher pitched reverb. It's higher in frequency. The reverb space is smaller because it hasn't been stepped down one notch using derez. And so as a result, the original sound of this sounded like this. kBeyond. I could probably do a new reverb along these lines from now until the end of the year without running out of ideas. So helpful are the tools I've been making, such as Into the Matrix from a couple of weeks ago. That's where this came from. That's not what I'm going to do. I have a bunch of other stuff to come out with. Things as elaborate as diving deeper into pointy guitar. I've got a thing called K Deluxe, or Pointy Deluxe, sorry. Not K Deluxe, those are the reverbs. Pointy Deluxe, which should be very interesting. I might be leaning on that for my own personal stuff because I think I've devised how to take guitar sound making entirely in the box and leave out even cab simulation and have it still work and produce sounds that are not exactly like the sounds of yesteryear or whatever, but are functional and useful and work. That's very interesting to me because the thing is, I feel like people should be able to make music without like taking out a massive loan or inheriting money or crap like that. And it's come to my attention that back in the day, people would play guitars because that was the cheap option. You had your guitar and an amp and whatever, and would go into a studio. The studio was somebody else's thing. And if you wanted to get into synthesizers, that was the unavailable expensive option. Well, now it's more like in the laptop, everything is synthesizers and soft synths and plugins like mine. And it's doing the guitar stuff properly that is more difficult and painful, because to do some of that stuff, you want to have not only the instrument, but also like amps and things, or indeed get into very heavily virtual stuff. And that's all interesting. I should also point out regarding my love of old school stuff, I do have, here, we're done with the sound. I do have a plugin called Decrackle, which it's high time that came out. I've been sitting on it for a while because I have too many other things that need to come out. But Decrackle is what I made to try to clean up the vinyl records that I used to post, and I'm looking to get back into that and post examples of the way sound can be, which is what the posting of songs is about. It's me trying to show people the kind of stuff that made me interested in sound back in the day. Because I'm like 50 something or whatever, I'm getting kind of older. So I grew up in a different day. When I was a college student, which I did not complete college, but when I was a college student, I was listening to vinyl records obsessively, like a madman, over record players, including some that I designed myself, and tube amplification over big old speakers. There was a lot that I still had to learn at the time, but I did tap into some of the essence of what people get into about that stuff, so I fully and deeply understand it and believe that I can bring that to your basic DAW musician and laptop user, etc. Whatever it is that you do, it should be possible to go real hard, whatever your resources are, and make music that hits people with the intensity of that stuff that I grew up on. I think I've been figuring that out. I think that the work on the reverbs is a good way to deliver the spacious qualities of what we had back then in a way that's not as, we don't find as much of that these days. A lot of stuff sounds the same as what AI would do if it extruded that sound. This kind of stuff, not so much. I can show you how to make stuff that AI would have a great difficulty getting within a country mile of it. And I'm interested in diving in that direction. Although people working in the music technology field have lots of interesting things that they can do. I myself, including using the modular stuff that I'm doing. I've spent a lot of time trying to get the machines to sing and make up songs by themselves, so I have a degree of sympathy for that. And I've got a bunch of people who are busily working on trying to do elaborate multi-channel music making, which is very interesting. At the moment, it seems to be largely the Mac people, because the Mac people are the ones who have access to old school audio units that are designed with N2N, is what it's called, channel technology. What that means is if you have audio units, and there are people also working, for instance, the folks doing Consolidated have recently added the ability to do mono. Well, a bunch of my plugins, I should go through and label them. There are hundreds and hundreds of plugins, so that's a bit of a job, but I should go through and label them. A bunch of my plugins on the audio unit, either retro or modern, are able to do literal mono processing, but there's a catch. And it's not even a catch, it's a hidden secret. The ones that do mono processing rather than strictly stereo on the Mac are also able to do multi-channel, as in 5.1, 7.1, 16.16, whatever you can do in a multi-channel capable DAW that can host these audio units. You can apply anything in Airwindows that supports end-to-end processing on that mix. And that's why I have gone through and picked out a selection of plugins that I was asked for end-to-end versions of. Those are Console 9, to Tape 8, and also to Tape 7, just because I knew that some people liked it. By the time you see this, those are now available in the AU collections. I will have snuck them into the direct downloads for those plugins. And there will be a to Tape 8 mono and to Tape 7 mono, much like there have been some compressor mono plugins all along. And if you use those on your multi-channel capable mix on the Mac, they will run on all of your channels at once. You don't get separate settings per channel though, but if you wanted to run like to Tape 8 on an entire multi-channel mix, now you can. You're welcome. And I'm going to see what I can do about flagging the other plugins, like all the other plugins that are capable of doing that. There should be some kind of marker on the website, or indeed a category on the website that you can click on, which will simply show you all of the ones that are able to do that. And it'll be a little subset of things. The ones that are capable of doing mono on the VST or in Airwindows Consolidated, that's a separate thing, but there's also going to be a list of those. And I'm not aware that those are able to run in multi-channel, but if they're able to make it work, I'm willing to help that happen. It all seems like fun stuff to do. Have fun with it. And I hope you enjoy kBeyond. There will be more like that coming. I've just got a bunch of other stuff that is also coming. And if anybody has a particular thing in mind, like remember how I promised that I would do Bricasti themed reverbs. So if you have a particular favorite of that, I continue to be not willing to try to clone any of those things. But stuff that will do the purpose served by some of those Bricasti ones. I'm probably going to revisit Cathedral, because now I can revisit Cathedral and have it actually be good. And I know that the filtration in Bricasti's Cathedral, etc., there's a specific sound that you get out of that. So I should probably look into doing, I guess it would be K Cathedral 4. And that will be a drop-in, with any kind of luck, doing as good as having the full-on Bricasti. By the way, I have one of those if anybody's interested in buying it. I think I'm able to go a little bit past that now. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.